Good morning. My name is Mark Rockford. I am part of the NCIHC work group for Languages of Lesser Diffusion. I'm here with Alex and Herberth, who come to us from Guatemala. Alex works with a network of indigenous interpreters to work with languages such as MAM. Herberth himself is a MAM English and Spanish interpreter, very, very multi-talented. So I wanted to take the advantage of their time to ask them a couple of questions today. Herberth, what are some of the unique challenges that MAM interpreters face when they're interpreting remotely?
One of the most important things, or I think that most of the complicated things, is like to basically try to understand all the kind of chords, because, well, even if it's in Spanish, it's a little bit complicated to know all the medical terminology. That's why I think that it's a big challenge for people like us that is in charge to check these kind of things.
Very good. And you've mentioned previously that I believe, MAM, there are different vocabularies in different regions that speak different versions of different dialects of MAM. Is that correct?
Yes, that is because the MAM language is divided in four sectors. The first one is located here in where I'm located right now. That is San Marcos. It's like a specific kind of dialect for the people that is living here. The another one is the MAM that is located in Todos Los Santos, Huehuetenango. That it's another department of Guatemala. The another one it's the MAM located in the part of Shela, and the last one it's like a MAM that is located between Huehuetenango and San Marcos. That's why basically this language is divided in four kind of languages, and each kind has like their own words, their own kind of expressions and idioms also.
Very good. But you can understand each other, right? It just takes some work to make sure that you get the message across. Is that correct?
Yes, that is. It's like the different of the English of Australia, the US, Canada. It basically is the same kind of is the same language, but with different kind of accents and words sometimes.
So when that happens and you're working with a speaker from a region that's not yours, what kinds of strategies, or how do you problem solve? How do you deal with that situation?
Well, after the time that I already spent working with this company, I already learned. Well, I have basically like a dictionary that I use to handle this kind of vocabularies. And well, based on the experience that I have, well, it's a little bit easier for me at this point. But since the beginning, it was like a little bit complicated. But well, at this point, we understand each other.
Very good. So now you're like, oh, you're saying this, you're from this region, and then you can pull out your dictionary for that particular region.
Yeah, exactly. Because each region has like their own accent. That's why we can identify that immediately. It's, as I mentioned, it's like the accent from somebody from Australia. Well, you can see that, you recognize that immediately.
Very good. Are there any idioms that stand out from any of the regions that you want to share? Like an idiom in English that's always struck me is it's raining cats and dogs. Obviously, it's not really raining, cats and dogs, but it's a funny way of saying it's raining a lot. Are there any interesting idioms from any of the regions that strike you as funny or interesting to share?
Well, something that I discovered a couple of days ago by interpreting for sure is that I discovered that, well, the way to say left and right in each idiom, it's like a little bit different. And usually, for example, in the sector in where I'm located right now, well, we mix usually the words between Spanish and MAM, because, well, we don't have, at this point, it's a little bit complicated to find somebody with the original language, with the original dialect. But a couple of days ago, I was talking with somebody from Shela that was talking about, he didn't mention left as izquierda. He was mentioning that he was mentioning something a little bit weird that was tman ovach. But was the first time that I heard this language. And I went with somebody that it's an expert for the dialect. He's like an old person, and I asked him, and he told me that it was something that they used, but wow, around 100 years ago, and he didn't remember that until I mentioned that again. That's why, well, was something interesting for me, and that's why I discovered that people from maybe Shela is using like the old dialect, but the very old, not the current that we use here right now as young people.
Wow, that is, I can imagine words from 100 years ago. Even English has changed, obviously, a great deal in 100 years, right? So, well, that's very interesting. Okay, can you tell me, are there any instances, and I'm sure this happens, right? Because it happens across all languages, where the word doesn't exist at all, and how you deal with it? For example, if they give you a word in English and it doesn't exist in mom, how do you handle that situation?
Yes, believe me that it happens a lot on this kind of job because, well, most of the medical terminology doesn't exist properly in mom. We have like to use different kind of words. For example, to express something, we have to use a couple of more words. That's why it's very usual here somebody translating the words using more time than you use in English. Well, basically the English looks like a little bit shorter than Spanish, but in mom the difference is it's bigger, because if you say something in English that needs like around 5 seconds to be said, you have to use around 20 seconds to say the same thing. But it's because we have to use more words to express the same thing.
Very good. Yeah, that can be, that's quite a lot of expansion, right? It gets much longer. Alex, in your experience, how have you guys supported interpreters, or what resources do you give them for the different dialects?
Well, for the different dialects that we actually provide, it's mostly the protocols that are basic in any language. We tell them that when they come across a word, a phrase, an acronym, or even a statement that they're not familiar with, they should go ahead and actually ask for a clarification. That's basically between English and Spanish. But when it comes to a dialect, a Mayan language, we understand that basically one word, for example, pap smear. The word pap smear does not exist in mom. So based on my, because I also do some training. When I do my trainings, I let them know. They tell me, Alex, if the word doesn't exist, what do we do? Well, you have to go ahead and first clarify. If still you're not able to understand, you have to go ahead and use your own words to explain. That's why sometimes they extend more. And sometimes the people, the customers will say, I said one word and you're taking about a minute or so. So, but that's what it is. They have to ask for a clarification. You apply the protocol, and basically they have to feel comfortable, because sometimes they think, oh my God, they said one word and I'm taking about a minute. They get like a little bit scared because they get confronted. So but I tell them, you as an interpreter have to feel comfortable, and if they confront you, you have to let them know that's the process that it takes.
Very good. Do you ever have them ask the provider to explain it? So, because as you said, if the word doesn't exist and you have to, the concept is so large, do you ever have the provider give their own explanation of what is a pap smear? Because this just doesn't exist in our language, right? So that then you could interpret their explanation.
Yes, of course. What happens in this kind of situation, since um dialects get a little bit more of no, how would you say this, they get a little bit more of a break, because they're not always going to be saying, hey, excuse me, this is the interpreter, would you mind explaining, even though that is one of the main things that they should go ahead and do. Excuse me, this is the Spanish interpreter, would you mind lowering the registration, would you mind using a synonym? Those are protocols that we provide them with. But at the end, it always, with the mom interpreter, exil interpreters, any kind of Mayan interpreter, at the end, it ends up at the same thing. They have to go ahead and use their own words to explain, because even because if they say, for example, pap smear, the doctor would try to explain it, but during the explanation, they would use another word that they're not even familiar with. So they cannot be actually asking for clarification or an explanation for each word they're saying. So, but yes,
Oh,
that's
and
one of
that makes total sense. I just want to be clear because you're not saying explain it as in you're simply saying use the concept, get this concept across, right? As what
right.
it is, right? Because too many times when we say explain, people are thinking, oh, I'm going to put my own words into it and make it whatever. No, there's a
Right.
you're going to use the same concept every time, right? And so
Yes.
you're going to use the same set of words, even if it takes a minute. It's going to be the same basic set. Like this is what a pap smear is, right? So, gotcha.
Correct.
That makes a lot of sense. Herberth, do you have any advice you'd like to give other interpreters of less common languages?
Well, my advice would be like to, as Alex already mentioned, is to try to be to learn each day, because well, we have to learn a lot of things at the same time, and basically two languages. And sometimes it's necessary to learn the things in the three languages, because most of the time it's very necessary to translate first of all the word to Spanish and then Spanish to mom. Sometimes it's a little bit complicated to translate directly a word from English to mom, because well, as I mentioned since the beginning, we use a lot of terminology that it's something not very usual for normal people like us. That's why I would suggest to everybody to try to keep improve yourself each day, and if it's necessary to always ask for a clarification, because this is part of the process to learn, because well, anybody could know all the things at the same moment. That's why it's very important to ask also always for a clarification or a repetition in case if it's necessary.
100%. That's great advice, because there are, I believe at last count, over 600,000 words in the English language alone. I don't know how many in Spanish, and I don't know how many in mom. Can you imagine trying to, let's say it's 1 million words total? That's an insane amount of terminology, right? So
Yeah.
awesome. Alex, do you have any parting words you'd like to share?
Yes, this basically goes for every interpreter in any language. One of the things that I see people actually come across, it's that they feel, especially interpreters that are starting in the interpreting business, they get scared of asking for repetition, clarification, especially if they've done it once or twice already during the same call. So I would tell them, don't feel comfortable. If you need a repetition, clarification, do it. It doesn't matter how many times, but it's best to go ahead and do it than to try to make something up. I myself, when I train the agents, I have three things that I myself consider are very important. One, note taking. Two, protocol use. And three, how to use your resources. And if you're able to go ahead and master those three things, there's no stopping you. You can interpret anything. So don't be scared. And when you come across something that you don't know, basically just apply the protocols. Spanish interpreter requires a repetition, clarification, or repetition in short segments.
That's awesome.
That's
That is
basically it.
wonderful advice. And you'll never stop using it, whether you're
Right.
a fresh interpreter or you've been interpreting for years. So great advice. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Take care.
A pleasure, Mark. Thank you, Mark. You have a
Sure.
great day.